理解是品牌的元素。什么叫做理解啊？这个理解是我把它简化了。这位 MIT 的助理教授，他希望跟大家沟通的是说，人的脑袋里面有一种机制，那个机制呢，是专门拿来判断你在想什么，别人在想什么。这件事情很关键。如果我们要去设计一个产品，想要卖给大众，或者你有一个业主，你想要设计一个房子，你希望他喜欢，你是不是需要判断他怎么样才会喜欢？当然要嘛，对不对？你进来一段时间了嘛，开始要问你，如果你要开始觉得是说，你想要把功课交来的时候，我看了会喜欢，你需要判断我会不会喜欢，对不对？那你怎么判断我会不会喜欢？
先从上课的过程，就是看，就是你对，就是你对，例如说你的题目，例如说行销、品牌、沟通这个，你的定义，基本定义是什么？然后我再从就是这三个基本定义去判断，说我该提出什么样的解答，这样子。
好，顺便讲一下，我们有40几位同学寄的那个 link 都连不成功，我有再发回来说，请你们那个我连不上去的，请大家再寄一次。那还是有少数大概10几位同学是寄到不是我指定的 email， 就直接寄到我的信箱去啊。这个就是都是简单的讲就是 communication， 不是我的 communication 有问题，就是你们的 communication 有问题。你知道你要判断我的想法，你的脑的哪一个部分在工作吗？
左脑。啊？左脑。
这里，右脑的后方这里，右耳朵的后方这一块，而且只有那一块。等一下我们要看的这个影片，我们看完这个影片以后就休息一下，我们回来讨论。这个影片告诉我们，小孩在3岁的时候，小孩在5岁的时候，小孩在8岁的时候，跟小孩在18岁的时候，跟小孩在不是小孩了，到了28岁的成人的时候，脑部的这个地方，右耳的后方有一块东西，这一块东西呢是不一样。所以小孩在判断事情，我们会老是觉得说幼稚，为什么幼稚？因为他不懂得怎么判断你。他还不知道怎么想，你脑袋在想什么？他用他的想法在跟我们沟通。等到他越来越大，他就用你的想法跟你沟通。那个是在这个位置啊，所以我们来看一下，先看，我们再回过头来讨论以及介绍这位是谁。
Today I'm going to talk to you about the problem of other minds. And the problem I'm going to talk to you about is not the familiar one from philosophy, which is how can we know whether other people have minds? That is, maybe you have a mind, and everyone else is just a really convincing robot. So that's a problem in philosophy, but for today's purposes, I'm going to assume that many people in this audience have a mind, and that I don't have to worry about this. There's a second problem that's maybe even more familiar to us as parents and teachers and spouses and novelists, which is why is it so hard to know what somebody else wants or believes?
为什么我们这么难去了解别人心里的想的事情，或者是他们相信的事情？那换一句话讲说。
Or perhaps more relevantly, why is it so hard to change what somebody else wants or believes? I think novelists put this best, like Philip Roth, who said, "And yet, what are we to do about this terribly significant business of other people? So ill-equipped are we all to envision one another's interior workings and invisible aims." So as a teacher and as a spouse, this is of course a problem I confront every day, but as a scientist, I'm interested in a different problem of other minds, and that's the one I'm going to introduce to you today. And that problem is, how is it so easy to know other minds? So to start with an illustration, You need almost no information, one snapshot of a stranger, to guess what this woman is thinking or what this man is. And put another way, the crux of the problem is the machine that we use for thinking about other minds, our brain, is made up of pieces, brain cells, that we share with all other animals, with monkeys and mice and even sea slugs. And yet you put them together in a particular network, and what you get is the capacity to write Romeo and Juliet.
我们跟猴子什么其他的动物一样，脑细胞细胞本身的层次没有不同，但是细胞跟细胞结构的方式，也就是说你拿来盖房子的砖块没有不同，可是盖房子的结构的方式不一样，所以我们盖出一个比较不一样的建筑啊，所以我们就可以利用这个结构去创作像罗密欧朱丽叶一样的作品。
Or to say, as Alan Greenspan did, I know you think you understand what you thought I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant.
格林斯潘是因为他是曾经是美国的中央银行的行长，差不多跟我们的中央银行行长同样的位置。那他不能够讲实话，可是他又不能够不讲话，所以他就永远讲让你听不懂的话。所以刚刚那句话就是一个，他是没有讲任何话。可是他讲了很多话，所以就是刚刚的那一句。
So the job of my field of cognitive neuroscience is to stand with these ideas, one in each hand, and to try to understand how you can put together simple units, simple messages over space and time in a network, and get this amazing human capacity to think about minds. So I'm going to tell you 3 things about this today. Obviously, the whole project here is huge. And I'm going to tell you just our first few steps about the discovery of a special brain region for thinking about other people's thoughts, some observations on the slow development of the system as we learn how to do this difficult job, and then finally to show that some of the differences between people in how we judge others can be explained by differences in this brain system. So the first thing I want to tell you is that there's a brain region in the human brain, in your brains, whose job it is to think about other people's thoughts. This is a picture of it. It's called the right temporoparietal junction. It's above and behind your right ear. And this is the brain region you used when you saw the pictures I showed you, or when you read Romeo and Juliet, or when you tried to understand Alan Greenspan. And you don't use it for solving any other kinds of logical problems.
请注意看他说的，你不用它来解决任何其他的逻辑问题。也就是说，我们的这一块的这个脑的功能是全部拿来专心的去判断别人在想什么，我们不拿来做其他的事情，是专用的。
So this brain region is called the RTPJ, and this picture shows the average activation in a group of what we call typical human adults. They're MIT undergraduates. The second thing I want to say about this brain system is that although we human adults are really good at understanding other minds, we weren't always that way. It takes children a long time to break into the system, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that long, extended process. The first thing I'm going to show you is a change between age 3 and 5.
在各位看过他在3岁跟5岁小孩所做的这个测验之后，我想各位大概就可以了解为什么小孩比较天真，为什么小孩好像比较不懂事。其实重点就是说，因为他没有办法判断我们在想什么。
The first thing I'm going to show you is a change between age 3 and 5, as kids learn to understand that somebody else can have beliefs that are different from their own. So I'm going to show you a 5-year-old who's getting a standard kind of puzzle that we call the false belief task.
This is the first pirate. His name is Ivan. And you know what pirates really like?
What?
Pirates really like cheese sandwiches.
Cheese. I love cheese.
Yeah. So Ivan has his cheese sandwich and he says, yum, 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 yum. I really love cheese sandwiches. And Ivan puts his sandwich over here on top of the pirate chest. And Ivan says, you know what? I need a drink with my lunch. And so Ivan goes to get a drink. And while Ivan is away, the wind comes, and it blows the sandwich down onto the grass. And now, here comes the other pirate. This pirate is called Joshua. See? And Joshua also really loves cheese sandwich. So Joshua has a cheese sandwich, and he says, yum, 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 yum. I love cheese sandwiches. And he puts his cheese sandwich over here on top of the pirate chest.
So that one is his.
That one's Joshua's. That's right.
And then his went on the ground.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now,
So he won't know which one is his.
oh, so now Joshua goes off to get a drink. So Ivan comes back and he says, I want my cheese sandwich. So which one do you think Ivan's going to take?
I think he was gonna take that one.
Yeah, you think he's going to take that one? All right, let's see.
I told you.
Oh, yeah, you were right. He took that one.
So that's a 5-year-old who clearly understands that other people can have false beliefs and what the consequences are for their actions.
5岁的时候，他可以判断说，那个掉下去，这个放在上面，所以他回来以后会误判说我刚刚放在上面，所以我就拿了这个。5岁的时候已经知道误判这件事情，看3岁的人怎么讲。
Now I'm going to show you a 3-year-old who got the same puzzle.
And Ivan says, I want my cheese sandwich. Which sandwich is he going to take? Do you think he's going to take that one? Let's see what happens. Let's see what he does. Here comes Ivan, and he says, I want my cheese sandwich. And he takes this one. Uh-oh. Why'd he take that one?
His was on the raft.
Oh.
So the 3-year-old does 2 things differently. First, he predicts Ivan will take the sandwich that's really his. And second, when he sees Ivan taking the sandwich where he left his, where we would say he's taking that one because he thinks it's his, the 3-year-old comes up with another explanation. He's not taking his own sandwich because he doesn't want it because now it's dirty on the ground. So that's why he's taking the other sandwich.
理解吗？意思是说到3岁的时候，他还不懂说误会这件事情，他会说啊，我的掉到那里，如果我真的没有拿我的起来的话，我拿了别人的，我是因为那个已经脏了，所以我要拿这个。到了5岁的时候，他已经知道说啊，我回来我一定会误会，因为这个在上面，我刚刚就放在这里，我就拿这个，所以那个是在脑部的判断别人的思考的这个部分呢，开始有一些发展。
Now, of course, development doesn't end at 5, and we can see the continuation of this process of learning to think about other people's thoughts by upping the ante and asking predictions.
我为什么要特别选这一支影片来跟大家这个共同学习呢？因为做设计最重要的就是要了解别人的想法。那我们要了解别人的想法的时候，我们就要知道了解别人的想法是在哪里想这件事情。那这些功能是怎么发挥出来的？
Now, not for an action prediction, but for a moral judgment. So first I'm going to show you the 3-year-old again.
Now, is Ivan being mean and naughty for taking Joshua's sandwich?
Yeah.
Yeah. Should Ivan get in trouble for taking Joshua's sandwich?
Yeah. So it's maybe not surprising he thinks it was mean of Ivan to take the Joshua sandwich, since he thinks Ivan only took Joshua's sandwich to avoid having to eat his own dirty sandwich. But now I'm going to show you the 5-year-old. Remember, the 5-year-old completely understood why Ivan took Joshua's sandwich.
Was Ivan being mean and naughty for taking Joshua's sandwich?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's not until age 7 that we get what looks more like an adult response.
Should Ivan get in trouble for taking Joshua's sandwich?
No, because the wind should get in trouble.
He says the wind should get in trouble for switching the sandwiches.
是不是越大就越炸？就赖给别人了，哎，是他，不是都。
And now what we've started to do in my lab is to put children into the brain scanner and ask what's going on in their brain as they develop this ability to think about other people's thoughts. So the first thing is that in children we see the same brain region, the RTPJ, being used while children are thinking about other people. But it's not quite like the adult brain. So whereas in the adults, as I told you, this brain region is almost completely specialized.
当你长大的时候，变成大人的时候，整块这个地方都是拿来专用。当你在判断别人的思考的时候，这里的活动很大，所以它的这个MRI 会照得出来，这里有很大的活动量。可是小孩的时候，他只有一点点，他这个其他地方还在做别的事呢，所以他并还没有开发成为判断别人的思考专用。
Does almost nothing else except for thinking about other people's thoughts. In children, it's much less so when they're age 5 to 8, the age range of the children I just showed you. And actually, if we even look at 8 to 11-year-olds getting into early adolescence, they still don't have quite an adult-like.
所以5岁到8岁的时候，他这边发展的少，到了差不多8岁到11岁的时候，发展到15%，到了大人的时候，大概到70-80%。
Brain region. And so what we can see is that over the course of childhood and even into adolescence, both the cognitive system, our mind's ability to think about other minds, and the brain system that supports it are continuing slowly to develop. But of course, as you're probably aware, even in adulthood, people differ from one another in how good they are at thinking of other minds, how often they do it, and how accurately. And so what we wanted to know was, could differences among adults in how they think about other people's thoughts be explained in terms of differences in this brain region? So the first thing that we did is we gave adults a version of the pirate problem that we gave to the kids, and I'm going to give that to you now. So Grace and her friend are on a tour of a chemical factory, and they take a break for coffee, and Grace's friend asks for some sugar in her coffee. Grace goes to make the coffee and finds by the coffee a pot containing a white powder, which is sugar. But the powder is labeled deadly poison. So Grace thinks that the powder is a deadly poison, and she puts it in her friend's coffee. And her friend drinks the coffee and is fine. How many people think it was morally permissible for Grace to put the powder in the coffee?
各位觉得呢？觉得这位 Grace 看到上面说有剧毒，然后他就把它放到他朋友的咖啡里面，结果他朋友喝了以后没事，因为那个说写有剧毒的东西里面是糖。你觉得 Grace 做错事的举手 ？OK。
Okay, good. So we asked people, how much should Grace be blamed in this case, which we call a failed attempt to harm? And we can compare that to another case where everything in the real world is the same. The powder is still sugar. But what's different is what Grace thinks. Now she thinks the powder is sugar. And perhaps unsurprisingly, if Grace thinks the powder is sugar and puts it in her friend's coffee, people say she deserves no blame at all. Whereas if she thinks the powder was poison, even though it's really sugar, now people say she deserves a lot of blame, even though what happened in the real world was exactly the same. Sugar. Now people.
他的意思就是说，如果我看到的是一个剧毒，可是我知道里面是糖，我放进去是糖，结果他喝了没事，我应该受到比较少的怪罪。如果我看到里面是糖，但是写的是剧毒，可是我也就把它放进去，我心里想说那个是剧毒，我要来毒它，当然我就要受到很大的这个责备。这个是大家都是这样想的。那各位也许会问说，那他为什么要研究这么简单的问题？他有更深的事情在后面。
And in fact, they say she deserves more blame, in this case, the failed attempt to harm, than in another case, which is we call an accident.
那这个是意外，就是说他以为是糖，结果变成剧毒，所以这个是他这个知道是剧毒，所以去害人，跟意外害人，跟没事，所以这个是不同的。是在讲我们脑袋的判断是说，这个是人死掉了，这个是人没死，这个是人没死，这个人没死跟这个人没死，但是他因为想毒死人，所以大家觉得他应该是要受到很大的谴责。虽然人没死，这个虽然人死掉了，可是他实在是一场误会，他真的以为是糖，没有想到是剧毒，所以他是 accident， 所以他被怪罪的是比他少很多。那这种情形之下，就开始牵涉到道德判断，这个就是我们如何去思考别人脑袋想的事情。
Where Grace thought the powder was sugar because it was labeled sugar and by the coffee machine, but actually the powder was poison. So even though when the powder was poison, the friend drank the coffee and died, people say Grace deserves less blame in that case when she innocently thought it was sugar than in the other case where she thought it was poison and no harm occurred. People, though, disagree a little bit about exactly how much blame Grace should get in the accident case. Some people think she should deserve more blame and other people less. And what I'm going to show you is what happened when we look inside the brains of people while they're making that judgment. So what I'm showing you from left to right is how much activity there was in this brain region, and from top to bottom, how much blame people said that Grace deserved. And what you can see is on the left, when there was very little activity in this brain region, people paid little attention to her innocent belief and said she deserved a lot of blame for the accident. Whereas on the right, where there was a lot of activity,
这个意思是说，当我们用这一块用的活动比较少，也就是这一块用的比较少的时候，我们都比较觉得这个误会，就是我误会以为是真的是糖，结果是剧毒。如果这个人不同的人他在想这件事情的时候，这里的活动比较少，他就会很快的判断说他应该是要被这个惩罚。那当这个活动比较多的时候，他就会觉得是说啊，他不应该受到惩罚。这一段的意思是在告诉我们说，这一块的运动越复杂的时候，我们越能够去体会到人家真正在做这个事情的时候，他的想法跟感受是什么，所以我们越能够去同理他，所以我们会认为他啊不应该罚他，因为他实在是不是故意的。可是如果我们这一块的运动比较少，我们就会讲说把人害死了就应该受到惩罚。所以这个部分是一个虽然说起来好像这个实验是一个很单纯很简单的一个实验，但是你要把它看成是理解我们对于去思考别人的脑海里想的事情，这个工作，因为这个工作是设计者非常复杂的一个工作，所以你必须要去多花点时间想这个事情。
People paid a lot more attention to her innocent belief and said she deserved a lot less blame for causing the accident. So that's good, but of course, what we'd rather is have a way to interfere with function in this brain region and see if we could change people's moral judgment. And we do have such a tool. It's called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS. This is a tool that lets us pass a magnetic pulse through somebody's skull into a small region of their brain and temporarily disorganize the function of the neurons in that region. So I'm going to show you a demo of this. First, I'm going to show you that this is a magnetic pulse, I'm going to show you what happens when I put a quarter on the machine. When you hear clicks, we're turning the machine on. So now I'm going to apply that same pulse.
所以它那个是一个很强的电磁波，那他把它放在自己脑袋里面，就是去，因为他用他自己就是来表示说，这个他要让自己的这个脑里面的某一部分受到电磁波的影响，所以那一部分的功能，因为我们的脑跟脑之间其实是化学物质跟电的传导，所以他去冲那一块的时候，就让那个地方就开始运作减少。那运作减少，他看看他要想说，如果那个地方运作减少，他的判断会不会改变
？To my brain, to the part of my brain that controls my hand. So there's no physical force, just a magnetic pulse.
那他现在要证明说他那个是有影响的，就是说他把它直接去刺激它，影响他右手的那一块脑部，所以他在左边这边去刺激，让他的右手看会不会受到刺激。
Magnetic pulse.
Yep. Ready? Yep.
Okay, so it causes a small involuntary contraction of my hand.
所以左脑这边受到刺激，右手就收缩，那个就掉下去，所以表示说电磁波对直接刺激控制右手的那一块的脑部，直接会让右手收缩。
By putting a magnetic pulse in my brain. And we can use that same pulse now applied to the RTPJ to ask if we can change people's moral judgments. So these are the judgments I showed you before, people's normal moral judgments. And then we can apply TMS to the RTPJ and ask how people's judgments change. And the first thing is people can still do this task overall. So their judgments of the case when everything was fine remain the same. They say she deserves no blame. But in the case of a failed attempt to harm, where Grace thought that it was poison, although it was really sugar, people now say it was more okay, she deserves less blame for putting the powder in the coffee. And in the case of the accident, where she thought that it was sugar, but it was really poison and so she caused a death, people say that it was less okay, she deserves more blame.
这一章很重要，这一章的意思就是说，当我们是正常的在使用这一块这个脑部的功能的时候，是深蓝色的。我们觉得是说， 这个想要去杀人，结果没有杀到啊，就是他还活着，这个我们认为他应该受到很大的惩罚。可是呢，当我们的这一块受到电磁波的刺激，让它减少活动的时候，我们就觉得它好像没有需要受到惩罚那么多。但是这里呢，我们因为这一块的活动比较复杂了，想的比较多了以后，就觉得是说，哦，他不小心把人杀死了这件事情，他的受到惩罚不应该很多，就是比较低。可是当这一块呢，就是被这个电磁波刺激了以后，变成活动比较少了以后呢，他的判断就觉得他受到惩罚会比较多。为什么？因为他比较不容易去同理了。他觉得说你把人杀死就是应该受到惩罚，所以这个同样的人在不同的刺激底下做的判断确实会改变。就是说，过失杀人在正常的时候，这一块脑部的运动充分的时候，他觉得说啊，他是过失，他可以理解他的过失。可是当这一块脑部受到刺激，降低他的这个活动量的时候，他就觉得是杀人就不对了，就是这样。所以这个就是在讲整个这一块的这个功能。它这一块的功能是什么呢？就去思考别人的脑袋里面的思想。
So what I've told you today is that people come actually especially well equipped to think about other people's thoughts. We have a special brain system that lets us think about what other people are thinking. This system takes a long time to develop, slowly throughout the course of childhood and into early adolescence. And even in adulthood, differences in this brain region can explain differences among adults in how we think about and judge other people. But I want to give the last word back to the novelists and to Philip Roth, who ended by saying, "The fact remains that getting people right is not what living is all about anyway. It's getting them wrong that is living, getting them wrong and wrong and wrong, and then on careful reconsideration, getting them wrong again." Thank you.
So I have a question. I mean, when you start talking about using magnetic pulses to change people's moral judgments, that sounds alarming. Please tell me that you're not taking phone calls from the Pentagon, say.
I'm not. I mean, they're calling, but I'm not taking the call.
They really are calling? But then seriously, you must lie awake at night sometimes wondering where this work leads. I mean, you're clearly an incredible human being, but someone can take this knowledge and in some future not torture chamber do acts that people here might be worried about.
Yeah, we worry about this. So there's a couple of things to say about TMS. One is that you can't be TMS without knowing it. So it's not a surreptitious technology. It's quite hard, actually, to get those very small changes. The changes I showed you are impressive to me because of what they tell us about the function of the brain, but they're small on the scale of the moral judgments that we actually make. And what we changed was not people's moral judgments when they're deciding what to do, when they're making action choices. We changed their ability to judge other people's actions. And so I think of what I'm doing not so much as studying the defendant in a criminal trial, but studying the jury.
Is your work going to lead to any recommendations in education to perhaps bring up a generation of kids able to make fairer moral judgments?
That's one of the idealistic hopes. So the whole research program here of studying the distinctive parts of the human brain is brand new. Until recently, what we knew about the brain were the things that any other animal's brain could do too. So we could study it in animal models. We knew how brains see and how they control the body and how they hear and sense. And the whole project of understanding how brains do the uniquely human things, learn language and abstract concepts and think about other people's thoughts, that's brand new, and we don't know yet what the implications will be of understanding it.
So I've got one last question. There's this thing called, the hard problem of consciousness that puzzles a lot of people, the notion that you can understand why a brain works, perhaps, but why does anyone have to feel anything? Why does it seem to require these beings who sense things for us to operate? You're a brilliant young neuroscientist. I mean, what chances do you think there are that at some time in your career, you or someone else is going to come up with some paradigm shift in understanding what seems an impossible problem?
I hope they do, and I think they probably won't.
Why?
It's not called the hard problem of consciousness for nothing.
That's a great answer, Rebecca Saxe. Thank you very much. That was fantastic.
好，请各位思考一下刚刚的最后这个影片。那我们休息10分钟，我们再回来把这个课上完。